Okay. Welcome everyone to Journeys to the Books of the Prophets. We are doing the book of Shoftim, and tonight we are going to exclusively look at chapters 4 and 5, which is the whole story of Devorah the prophetess. Before we do that, though, I want to take the opportunity to say a few words to the people who are here live, and mostly for the people who watch it afterwards. Is last week we sent out an email and we shared a WhatsApp called "We Turn to You in Our Hour of Need." For those who have been benefiting from all of these classes, Living with the Times, Numerical Gems, for all the people who have been here for Shabbat or one of our Shabbatons in 50 cities around the world. To be very, very honest, we are very, very challenged right now to even pay basic expenses. I rarely turn to people, but there's only so much we can do for free without having support from people who benefit from what we are doing. So we're going to send out the email again tomorrow. We turn to you in our hour of need. Hanukkah is coming, the tradition to give Hanukkah gelt. And again, to be very, very honest, our budget, which is minimal to begin with, is around 60% of what it was just 5 years ago. And that's a combination of COVID, of an economy that hasn't been the greatest, and the current war in Israel. There's so many legitimate needs. Anyways, we are turning to all of you in our hour of need. And I should say that many people who are watching right now and listening have already given generously, and we appreciate so much. So this is directed really for people who have not responded to us, and we can only really continue with the support of people who benefit from what we're doing. So I'll use the expression that we all know: a word to the wise is sufficient, and that is what you'll hear from me. Onwards to the book of Shoftim. At the end of chapter 3, it's only like 1 or 2 verses, but I just want to get them in here because we know that after Yeshua passed away, the next judge was Otniel. We talked about him extensively. And then there was another judge who really was prominent only for a short time, but I don't want to skip over him. His name was Shamgar. And between Otniel and Devorah, who we will be dealing with tonight, he was one of the judges. His name, Shamgar, for people, unfortunately, we know this name because one of the, call it the funeral places in Israel is called Shamgar. And unfortunately, I've been there for many levayas before setting off for the actual burial. And it's called Shamgar. So this name is current in Israel. And then tonight, 2 whole chapters about Devorah. So first it says, and we went over this last week, and we're going to see this over and over again. There's a certain process, a dynamic that's repeated over and over in the book of Shoftim, where a judge will rule, everything will be well, the judge passes away, the people turn away from God, turn away from the Torah, and God brings an enemy, or an enemy comes. Many times the language is that God brings an enemy. It's what we call measure for measure, going back to the 5 books of Moses, the Chumash, where we're told over and over again, if we follow God, we follow the mitzvot, we create a just, caring society, everything will be good. But when we turn away from the Torah and God, it's a measure for measure. Things turn out not to be so good. And so here in the beginning of chapter 4, again, the people turn away from God, and a new enemy, Yavin, who is the Melech Canaan, he ruled over for Israel for 20 years, and he ruled very harshly. And his general was Sisera. And it mentions that he had 900 iron chariots. I didn't think of it before, but the song I played for you tonight was called Merkava, which means chariot. I didn't actually do it because of that, but that's a big part of the story here, is that he ruled very harshly, and he had a very strong army behind him, 900 iron chariots. And then Devorah is introduced in the 4th verse of the 4th chapter. And it says, Devorah Isha Neviah Eshet Lepidat Hi Shavta et Israel Be'etahi. So into this difficult situation, Devorah is introduced, and she's introduced as a prophetess. And she's called Eshet Lepidot, the woman or the wife, depending on the commentary, of Lepidot. Lepidot literally means a flame in the plural. Flames, the wife of flames, the woman of flames. And she judged Israel at that time. So this one verse has a lot going on here. So the first thing is, Devorah is introduced as a prophetess. She's one of the 7, what we'll call official prophetesses in Israel throughout the whole Tanakh. The first one who is identified as a prophetess was Miriam. After we crossed the Red Sea and Moshe sang the Song of the Sea with all of Israel, then it says that Miriam, the prophetess, gathered all the women, and they also sang with their drums and their tambourines. Hopefully at the end, if we have time, we'll go deeper into who are these 7 prophetesses. Right now, though, I want to get through the storyline, and hopefully we'll return to this. But it also says that she was Eshet Lepidot. So there are many, many different commentaries or possibilities of what this means. But again, literally, it means the wife or the woman of flames. So some say that she was married to a person who made the wicks for the menorah in the temple, because Lepidot means flames. And so, according to one tradition, her husband, one of the things he did, obviously wasn't the only thing he did, but he was known to make these like perfect thick wicks for the menorah in the temple. Others say that it was Devorah herself who made these wicks for the temple. Some say she was married to this person who is called here Lepidot. Others say she was married to Barak. We're going to see Barak will enter the scene very soon. Some say she was married to Barak. So this is a typical thing that we confront throughout Jewish tradition, that we have different opinions of how we understand the verses. So in a certain way, almost all of these could be true simultaneously, but sometimes the opinions are conflicting one with the other. Others say she was called Eshet Lepidot because she was a fiery neshama, and that is connected to her being a prophetess. So we're going to see that during this story, she leads the battle against Yavin and Sisera, but she does it through prophecy, that God is guiding her how and when and where to fight the battles. That's why she's called a prophetess. It wasn't that she was just, she was a good strategist, and she knew the rules or the strategy of war, but she was operating from a place of God was revealing to her when and how and by whom she should fight this war. And then it says that she judged the people at the time. So this has a lot of commentary also, because in Jewish law, women are not usually judges. In fact, she is the only woman in the entire Tanakh who is, it's attributed to her that she judged the people. So again, there's a lot of commentary. What does it mean? Was she an official judge? Was she a decider of law? Or was she just such a wise woman that everyone flocked to her? Again, different opinions. The important thing, though, is Devorah is the leader of the generation. Whether we call her a judge or a prophetess or a wise woman or a woman lepidot, on fire, and people everywhere felt that. Excuse me. And then the next verse 5 says, "V'hi yoshevet tachat tomer Devorah, bein Cherma ubein Beit El, Bahar Ephraim, v'alu aleha b'nei Yisrael lif lemishpat." So it says that she sat under a date palm. That's where she judged the people, not in a Beit Midrash, not in a courtroom, under a date palm. And it was between this place called Horma and Beit El. Beit El, there is a big Jewish settlement in the place called Beit El in Har Ephraim, in the Nachalah, the inheritance of Ephraim. And people from all of Israel came to have judgment from her. Again, like we said before, it's not clear if it means judgment in the level of halacha, or just what do I do in this circumstance? What do I do with my life? That kind of a thing. So the Arizal says an amazing thing. First of all, why is she sitting under a date palm? Why isn't she sitting officially in a building, a courtroom? So they say for a couple of reasons. One was the issue of modesty, is that if individual men would come to her, here she's in the open. There's nothing hidden from anyone. There's a concept where a man and a woman who are not married, are not to be secluded alone. And so Devorah got out of that whole possible problem by having people come to her in the open. And that also signified that everything was in the open. In modern politics, we have this idea where decisions are made in smoke-filled back rooms. And that's how laws are made. That's how deals are made. Here, Devorah, everything's in the open. There's nothing to hide from anyone. And of course, she was revered. These verses are making it clear that people flocked to her. So the Arizal says, again, why a date palm? What's the connection? It could have said an apple tree or in a orchard or out in a field in the open. But it says specifically under a date palm. So the Arizal says really an amazing thing. Says that Devorah is an incarnation of Tamar. Very quickly, Tamar is the daughter-in-law of Yehuda, the first Yehuda, and she is married to his son. His son dies, and in a Levirate marriage, she marries the other son. He also dies, and there's a third son, but Yehuda is not giving her to the third son. He's kind of like afraid. And so this is in Parshat Vayeshev, which was last week, is last week's Parsha. This whole very, very, very deep incident happens. I'm giving it over in a relatively superficial way, but there's tremendous depths in this story. Anyways, Tamar is not a prophetess, but she has a sense of prophecy that she is meant to have children from the family of Yehuda who will be kings. And it's not happening. And so she dresses up as a prostitute, and Yehuda's wife has passed away, and she entices him, and they have relations. And he says, "What do I have to pay you?" And she mentioned somebody didn't have it, so she took an assurity from him, and so she became pregnant, and people were outraged. But she sent a sign to Yehuda, "I am pregnant by the one whose staff I have." And he recognized that it was his staff. And he said, "Sadka mimeni. She is more righteous than me." And Rashi says that we can read it, she's more righteous than me. But Rashi brings a tradition that he said, Sadka, she is righteous. The word mimeni came from God, from a voice from heaven saying, this whole incident is from me. She gave birth to twins, and from parrots comes the line of David HaMelech. So her sense of prophecy was correct. So the Arizal says that even though from her comes Mashiach ben David, because she did this through dressing up and sitting at the crossroads as a prostitute, she needed to fix this. And how did she fix this? That's why it says that Devorah sat under a palm tree, under a tamar tree, Tomer Devorah. So he says that was her fixing, was by incarnating in Devorah. An amazing understanding here. And then the Arizal says that another soul was incarnated into Devorah, and that was Moshe's wife, Zipporah. Why was Zipporah incarnated into Devorah? Is because when Moshe went to Egypt to redeem the Jews, he took Zipporah, and along the way they had this incident where they had not circumcised their second son. And Moshe thought, because now I can't circumcise him because we're on the way traveling back to Egypt. And actually Moshe's life was in danger. And Zipporah circumcised her son and saved Moshe. And then Moshe sent her back because it was a dangerous mission he was on. And she went back to Midian until after they came out of Egypt. And so she missed the Song of the Sea. So the Arizal says she was incarnated into Devorah so she could be part of the song that Devorah would sing after they win the battle, which we're going to talk about right now. So these are, we'll call it divine inspiration coming from the Arizal. Okay, now I'm going to go through the story much quicker. And she calls to Barak. Again, according to some opinions, that's her husband. She calls to Barak and says, God has appointed you to gather 10,000 men from the tribe of Naphtali and Zebulun, and to lead a war against Yavin. Remember, Yavin and Sisera are ruling over Israel for 20 years in a very, very, very harsh way. And also a important verse, Barak says, I will only go if you come with me. And if you don't come with me, I won't go. So this just indicates the esteem and reverence that people had for Devorah. She was truly the leader of the generation. And Barak, who is a general, says, unless you come with me to the war, I'm not going to go. In other words, we need your energy. And so she agrees. And in chapter 4, it tells about the war. And they gather the 10,000 people together. I mentioned last week already that once the 7 years of the conquest and the 7 years of apportioning the different tribes to their inheritance, many of the wars that were fought by 1 or 2 or 3 tribes in the area where they were being challenged. It wasn't that all of Israel got together anymore. It was like we learned already that many of the remnants of the nations that we were trying to conquer still lived in the land. We never totally conquered them. And so ongoing battles were being fought. So here it's up north. According to tradition, Devorah is from the tribe of Naphtali. So Rashi tells us that in, one second, that in Yaakov's blessings to his children, so the blessing for Naphtali was the following. One second. Here we go. So this is in, excuse me, chapter 49, verse 21. It says, Naphtali ayala shlucha hanotain imre shafer. Naphtali is a swift deer, like on a mission, that gives forth beautiful sayings. Beautiful words come from Naphtali. His whole bracha is just one verse. So what does it mean he was a swift deer? So Rashi brings a number of opinions, but he says that the land of Naphtali that first of all, a deer is known to be swift. And that's connected to the produce of the land of Naphtali. But he also says that this is alluding to the war with Sisera, and that it was because of Devorah, who gathered 10,000 from the tribe of Naphtali, that they were able to win this war. And then again, when it says beautiful sayings, so it says this is from Devorah, who sang a song after they had won the battle. He actually brings other opinions also, but the Arizal says that Ayala Hashlucha. Wait 1 second again, I'm sorry. One second. So the three words, Ayala Shlucha Hanotain, a swift deer who gives, the first letters are Aleph, Shin, Hey, which means Isha, woman. And that's why Rashi brings this tradition that it's alluding to Devorah, that she was swift to enter into this war, and that she was the one who said beautiful things afterwards. So what happens is, in the war, Barak is successful, and the general Sisera escapes, like on foot, and he ends up in the tent of Yael. Yael was married to a Canaanite who was from the descendants of Yitro. We've learned about them already, that the descendants of Yitro settled in the land of Israel. And one of them was married to Yael. Sisera escapes. His army is decimated. And Yael invites him to come into the tent. And so he comes in, and he says, I'm very, very thirsty. First he says, if anyone comes, don't tell them I'm here. She said, don't worry, I'll protect you. You're safe here. So he says, I'm very thirsty. So she gave him to drink, including wine. And when he fell asleep, she took a tent peg and drove it through his forehead. And then she came out and let everyone know that Sisera is dead. And whoever was left, the army, they all scattered, and they were able to defeat the entire army. And then afterwards, right after they win the war, then it says that Devorah and Barak, we're now in the 5th chapter. It says, V'tasher Devorah uBarak ben Avinoam b'yom ahu le'mor b'froa peraot b'Yisrael v'hitnadev am baruchu Hashem. So it says, and then Devorah and Barak sing on that day, they sing. Now this song is one of the 10 archetypal songs sung throughout Jewish history. This is something we've discussed before, that in the Tanakh, there are actually 9 songs that are sung through history. And the 10th is what's called Shirul Hashem Shir Chadash, that at the time of the redemption, the time of Mashiach, they will sing a new song. The 10th song is a new song. And one of them is the song of Devorah. And it's a relatively long song. I'm just going to summarize it. But I do want to mention that this was a great redemption. This was after 20 years of being oppressed. Right now, we're in a war for a year and approximately 3 months. So just imagine, and at this point, have the upper hand. Though because of our hostages, it doesn't feel like we're very victorious. And just on Shabbat at 4 in.m, we had a siren here, and we had to scramble into our bomb shelter. So the war is far from over, but just imagine being oppressed for 20 years. And so it was a great redemption. And Devorah sings. There's another figure in Jewish history who also experienced a tremendous redemption. That was Chizkiyahu. Chizkiyahu, this is after the Assyrians had taken the 10 tribes away, and in a certain way, never to be seen again, even though there are seeds of the 10 tribes all over the world. But as full tribes that are identifiable, we lost the 10 tribes. And then Sennacherib was marching on Jerusalem. He had Jerusalem surrounded. And Chizkiyahu was the king. And overnight, the entire army of Sennacherib, hundreds of thousands of soldiers, died. Very mysteriously. Maybe we'll call it a plague. It was totally a miracle. And the siege was broken and Jerusalem was saved. And the sages say that Chizkiyahu was on the level, he was very, very righteous, that he could have been Mashiach. That miracle that happened could have turned all of Jewish history around, and he was on the level to be Mashiach, but he didn't sing a song. After that great redemption, he didn't sing. Moshe sang after we crossed the Red Sea. He sang. Here, Devorah sings. So here we see the power of these 10 songs. In short, this song, Devorah is applauding all those who came and volunteered to fight in this war. No one had to. And she also castigates those who didn't come to volunteer. And much of the song, we simply don't have time to go over each and every line. Of course, there's so much commentary on virtually every line of the song. But I'm just trying to summarize it. So she applauds those who volunteered. Again, we could relate it to today, is when much of this war is being fought by our reserves. And many of the reserves, if they wanted a way out, they could find a way out. They're not in the standing army. But we have seen incredible, what we'll call volunteerism in the current war that we're fighting right now. Incredible bravery and people risking everything for the Jewish people and to protect Am Yisrael and the land of Israel. So in this song, she goes to great length to applaud those, and she also castigates those who didn't come to help. So one thing that is interesting in the song, that in a number of places there's a double language. So right in the third verse, it says, Anochi Lashem, Anochi Ashira. I am for Hashem, I will sing. And in a number of other places during the song, so she uses a double language. Here in the 12th verse, it says, Uri, Uri, Devorah, Uri, Uri, Dabrei Shir. Wake up, Devorah. Wake up, sing a song. So some say actually she's in a way speaking to herself, like, wake up, Devorah, it's time to sing. In other words, she's giving over the inspiration behind this song. Others say it's Barak, because remember in the beginning, even though we always attribute this song to Devorah, but the actual opening verse says that Devorah and Barak sang this song, because he was very important in this. But nonetheless, we attribute this to Devorah. So some say he said to Devorah, wake up, Devorah, wake up and sing. Others say it was divine inspiration. It was like a voice from heaven that was saying, Devorah, wake up, it's time to sing. So what's significant here is that even though it also comes in other prophets, that in the song Lecha Dodi that we sing at Kabbalat Shabbat, we have this double language, Uri, Uri, Shir Daberi, wake up, sing a song. And it's almost virtually what it says here. Uri, Uri, Dabri Shir. And then at the end of the song, she praises Yael. She praises Yael, that she is like the heroine of this whole story. Because if Sisera would have survived, so in theory, he could have escaped and got his legions back together and they would have fought against Israel again. But she killed Sisera. And so she praises him greatly at the end of the song. And the end of the song says, V'tishko ta'oretz arba'im shana. And the land had rest for 40 years. This is, again, we've seen this a number of times already, and we're going to see it again, that this cycle of Israel following God, doing the mitzvot, being righteous, having a righteous judge lead them. Then they have rest. And then a new generation comes, the judge passes away, and the people fall away from their righteousness, and the cycle starts all over again. Another enemy comes, and then God raises up another judge, and the people cry out for redemption. But here at the end of the song, it says, and the land had rest for 40 years. So there are two things that I'd like to do now is I want to go quickly over a little bit about the 7 prophetesses. Now, according to tradition, there were 48 prophets and 7 prophetesses. But in the Tractate of Megillah, it says that at one time, there were 1 million prophets in Israel. This is at the time where they had schools of prophecy, where the ordinary person longed to be close to God through being a proper vessel for prophetic experience. So why are we told it's 48? So these are 48 who, according to tradition, stood out, and most of them had messages for the people. Not all of them, but almost all of them are the prophets that we have in the minor prophets, in the major prophets, in the book of Judges and the book of Malachim. And so there were 7 women prophetesses. Who were they? Sarah, Miriam, Devorah, Hannah, Abigail, Huldah, and Esther. These are the 7, call it official prophetesses. Sarah, we know from the text that God even said to Avram, everything that Sarah says, listen to her words. Avram is the first person in the Torah who is called a prophet. He's, in one incident, he's labeled a prophet. Sarah is never called a prophetess. As I said before, the first one is Miriam. But God himself says, whatever Sarah says to you, listen to her words. And Rashi brings this tradition that Sarah's sense of prophecy was even greater than Avram's. Now, why not Rivka? Because Rivka prophetically understood that Yaakov needed the blessing from Yitzchak and not Esav. And it also says afterwards, it says that Esav thought in his heart, when my father passes away, I will kill Yaakov. And then Rivka calls in Yaakov and says, you need to flee because your brother wants to kill him. So the question is, well, how did she know? She had prophetic insight. But she's not called an official prophetess, nor are Rachel and Leah. But they also had tremendous prophetic insight when they named their children. When they named their children, it was full of prophetic insight. As we said, Miriam is the first one who's called a prophetess. Devorah is called a prophetess. Hannah, and she also sang a song. Hannah is the one who had this tremendous desire to have a child, and she is davening in the Mishkan in Shiloh. And Eli, the high priest, thinks that she's drunk. In other words, her prayer is so intense. He thinks she's drunk. And she explains to him, I'm not drunk, I'm just praying from the bottom of my heart. And Eli was a bit embarrassed, and he blessed her, and she had a child who was Shemuel. What's interesting is Hannah then sings a song. It's one of the 10 songs. Her husband is Elkanah. Her son is Shmuel. It's the only family in the entire Tanakh where the husband, wife, and child are all considered official prophets. There's much to tell about Hannah. The song of Hannah is part of the Rosh Hashanah davening. It's the Haftorah for the first day of Rosh Hashanah. And then there's Avigail. Avigail is one of the wives of David. And just because of a lack of time, we can't go into everything. But she prophetically, she was married at the time. Excuse me. L'chaim, everyone, l'chaim. She was married at the time to a very evil person. David set eyes on her and he desired her. And she said, don't let this be a stumbling block to you. In other words, cool it. Right now, I'm married. And it turns out that her husband died and David did marry her. And she was considered very, very righteous. But when she said, don't let this be a stumbling block to her, she meant don't let your physical desires get the best of you. But not only in this case, she was prophesying that he would fall for the same reason with Bathsheba, that he didn't hold back when he should have. And then we have Huldah. Huldah was a relative of Jeremiah, of Yirmiyahu. She was considered a prophetess, a great prophetess. In fact, one of the gates around Jerusalem to this day is called Shar Huldah, named after her. And the last one is Esther. Queen Esther had prophetic powers. So I just wanted to mention a little bit about the 7 prophetesses. We're going to end now with a startling Gemara. At the end of the song of Devorah, she's praising Yael. One second. And the verse says like this. Remember, she, in a certain way, gets Sisera drunk. He falls asleep, and she puts a tent peg through his forehead. But the verse reads like this. It says, Bein ragleha kira nafal, shechav bein ragleha, kara nafal ka'asher kara sham nafal shidud. If you just hear the words, it's very repetition. It says the word he fell 3 different times, and between her legs, it says three times. And so the sages say, when you read this verse, what happened here was, in order to knock him out, it wasn't just the wine. She had relations with him 7 times. Because there are 7 verbs in this verse. He fell between her legs, and again, over and over. Between her legs, he fell over and over. And the sages say that it's alluding, because like I said, it's a very clumsy kind of language here, and that something is being hinted to here. So it says that she slept with him, had relations with him 7 times, and then got up and killed him. So in the Gemara, they discuss, now it goes back to Tamar. Now here's the incredible connection here, because before we said that Devorah is a reincarnation of Tamar. Tamar is the one who dressed up like a prostitute, because Yehuda, he even said, she's more righteous than me. I should have given my 3rd son to her. And again, according to tradition, the line of King David comes from that act. So the Gemara says like this. It says, Tamar zinta, Zimri zinta. So it says Tamar had relations with Yehuda, not in such a kosher way. And Zimri, the story in the book of Bamidbar, who takes a foreign woman in front of everyone and has relations with her, this is the one who Pinchas killed. And he also had immoral relations. But it says, Tamar zinta v'yetza mimena malachim u'neviim. Tamar acted like a prostitute, but from her came kings and prophets. And Zimri engaged in immoral relations, and 24,000 Jews died because of it, because of the plague that broke out. And so Amar Rabbi Nachman Bar Yitzchak, Gedola Avera Lishma Mitzvah Shelo Lishma. He said, greater is a sin that is done for a good purpose than a mitzvah that is done for with not a good motivation. The Gemara is astounded by this statement. And they say, are you telling me that doing a sin, even for a good reason, is better than doing a mitzvah not for the best intention? Haven't we learned that it's better to do a mitzvah not for the best intention, because it will lead eventually to doing mitzvah for a good intention? So the Gemara changes its language and says that doing a sin for the right purposes is like on the same level of doing a mitzvah not for the best motives. So I have to put in here that this we can't misunderstand what's being said here. In no way, shape, or form is it saying that people should go out and sin and have good intentions while they're sinning. It is absolutely not saying this. And unfortunately, many people have fallen because of this. But what it is, it brings a couple of examples. And the example that it brings is Yael. One of the examples is Yael. She understood that she needs to get rid of Sisera. He's in her tent. He is a powerful general. What is she going to do here? And so she has relations with him, not like on purpose. I'm doing a sin for a good purpose, not at all. But she had to get him, she had to knock him out. And so she had relations with him. So the Gemara asks, well, we can't even put her in that category because she must have had pleasure from this. And the Gemara says that a righteous person does not get any pleasure from having to deal with a wicked person like this. Don't think for a minute that Yael had any pleasure from what she was doing. She was doing it only because she felt this is what she had to do to accomplish something. The other example that is brought here are the daughters of Lot. We know the story that after Sodom is destroyed, and it seemed like a catalysm, like the whole world had ended. And the two daughters of Lot were in a cave with their father, and they think they're the only people left in the world. And so the older daughter said, like, if the human race is going to continue, we're going to have relations with our father because there's no one left. There'll be no one to continue. And they both had relations. And from this comes the nation of Moab and Ammon. And that's the other example that's brought. So I thought twice about whether I should give this over, but I'm assuming everyone here is righteous and will not misunderstand this. So I wanted to say this again, this is in no way saying that a person should purposely sin and try to come up with some good reason or motivation for it. But what it's saying is that there are extreme circumstances where one is forced to do something that might not be so kosher, but the overall purpose is one that needs to be done. And like I said, the only reason I'm bringing this because it's in the Song of Devorah. That's where they learn it from. This one verse where she's praising Yael. So unfortunately, in Jewish history, there were a couple of times where people misused this and thought that they could somehow elevate fallen sparks by doing sins with a good motivation. And this led to total disaster for the Jewish people. I'm talking specifically about Shabbatai Tzvi and Yaakov Frank. These are two people who purported to be Mashiach, and their followers fell into a total misunderstanding of what is being said here. And they thought that they could somehow lift up fallen sparks of klipa by having good intentions. They brought disaster upon Israel and their followers. But here I felt we have a mature audience here. And so this is part of our tradition. And so that's why we learned it. Tamar also, she did what she did, but here we learn from the Arizal, it needed a tikkun. There needed to be a tikkun here. So she was incarnated in Tamar. So I thought it was so interesting that the stories of Tamar and Devorah are connected to the story of Yael and how the Gemara understands what she did and why she did it. So there's a lot to think about here. But as I said, we should not in any way misunderstand. This is in some way connected to the idea. It's not exactly connected, but somewhat connected to that. Let's say when there is a danger to life on Shabbat, so the mitzvah is to break Shabbat, is to do things that under ordinary circumstances we would never do, not purposely. We always do things by mistake. But if a life is in danger, or even a doubt if a life is in danger, it supersedes the laws of Shabbat. So here we're talking about extreme circumstances. I'll just think of like one example, and there are many examples, is in 1492, when the last day for Jews to be out of Spain was on Tisha B'Av. That was the last day. And on Tisha B'Av, the Abarbanel, the leader of the generation, who could have stayed, Ferdinand and Isabel, he was so valuable, they would make an exception for him to stay. He was such an incredible advisor to them. But he left with everyone, and it was a fast day. Tisha B'Av is a fast day. And as they were crossing the border, he told them to play music, something we would never do on Tisha B'Av. But he felt that hundreds of years of what's called the golden age of Spain, and people were leaving with their shirts on their backs. And he said, so we don't fall into depression, we should play music. It's just an example of an extreme case. That's what we're talking about here. Because what would have happened if all those people fell into depression, gave up on being Jewish, like we've had it? He felt that at that moment there was a reason to supersede the usual laws of Tisha B'Av. This is not for ordinary people to do under ordinary circumstances. Anyways, we should always do mitzvot for the right reasons, with the right intentions. And this is just an example of how honest our sages were. The Gemara it's such a, don't even have the right adjective for how it deals with every circumstance that one can imagine. Here, we learned about extreme cases and what we can learn from them. Okay. Okay, as we know, as you probably know by now, we go right into insights into the Haftorah. Welcome everyone to Insights into the Haftorah, the weekly Haftorah. This coming week is Parshat Miketz, and the Haftorah comes from the first book of Kings, the 3rd chapter. As we always introduce every class with the question, what is the connection between the Haftorah and the portion of the week? The general principle is what we have to look for. What is the connection? So this week is Parshat Miketz. And here, Miketz literally means it was at the end of 2 years, and Pharaoh had a dream. What are these 2 years talking about? So if we remember, in the previous Parsha ends, Yosef is in jail. He's in jail for 10 years. And the butler and baker have a dream. And Yosef interprets it for them correctly, and exactly what he said would happen happened. The butler was returned to his position as the butler of Pharaoh, and the baker was hung. And Yosef said, please, when you return to Pharaoh, tell him I'm in jail for false reasons, for false pretenses. Please help me get out of here. And the parsha ends that the butler forgot. He didn't remember. And so here it says that at the end of 2 years, Pharaoh has a dream. And then he has two dreams. He has two dreams. At the end of the first dream, it says, Vayikatz Paro, which is close to the word miketz. Here, miketz means at the end of 2 years. But it also means like he woke up startled. He woke up from his dream and he remembered his dream. And it says it twice. So now we can understand why this is the Haftorah, because here it begins with the word Vayikatz. Vayikatz Shlomo v'hinei chalom. Vayavo Yerushalayim v'yamod lifnei Aron Brit Hashem v'yal alot v'yas shlamim v'yas mishteh lekol avadav. So here it says that Shlomo, King Solomon, wakes up from a dream and he comes to Jerusalem and he stands before the Holy Ark and he offers up offerings and he makes a celebration for all of his, for all of the people. Shlomo becomes king when he's 12 years old. And there's a real question here because what happens next is it tells one story. It tells the story of two zonot, two prostitutes that come for judgment in front of Shlomo. And the story is, and the whole Haftorah tells this one story. One second. And the story is these two women are together in a house and they're by themselves and they both give birth at the same time, more or less, exactly the same time. And they go to sleep. And one of the women, like by mistake, lies on her newborn baby and smothers him and he dies. And she takes her dead child and she exchanges it for the other woman's live child as she's sleeping. And so when the woman wakes up and she sees a dead child, she's like, and she looks at it, she said, "This is not my child. This is not the one I gave birth to." And so she's basically accusing the other woman of exchanging the children. So they come to Shlomo and they explain the whole story to him. And Shlomo says, "Bring me a sword. I will cut the baby in half, and I'll give one half to you and one half to you." And when the woman whose son was really the live one and who was exchanged says, no, don't do it. Let she can have the baby. Let the baby live. And the other woman said, "No, cut the baby in half. We'll both have half." And Shlomo says, the woman who said, let the baby live, don't cut, she is the true mother, because a true mother would never agree to have her baby cut in half, even if she would lose her to a false accusation. And the Haftorah continues and says, when people heard this judgment, they were like in awe of his wisdom. And it just ends by saying, it says that all of Israel heard about this. Word got around that Shlomo was able to discern this in this almost cunning way, and it became known that he had Chachmat Elokim. He had the wisdom of God. And then it says, and Shlomo ruled over all of Israel. Remember, he's 12 years old when this happens. Now, there's a real question here, because the Haftorah begins that Shlomo woke up from a dream. He came to Jerusalem and he gave judgment in this case. Before that, though, is about the whole dream. So the question might be, why did they choose the judgment as the Haftorah and not the whole dream that he had? What was the dream? That was in the preceding verses. Again, this starts in the 3rd chapter. But what happens is when Shlomo became king, it says that he fell asleep, he had a dream, and God came to him and said, Shlomo, make a wish. Like, what do you want? And I'll give it to you. Anything you want, I'll give it to you. And Shlomo makes like an impassioned, and it's in the book of Malachim, plea that he has wisdom to judge the people correctly. And God answers and says, since you asked for wisdom, and you didn't ask for money, you didn't ask for power, you didn't ask for renown, fame, I will give you wisdom, and I'll give you all those other things as well. And that's where the Haftorah begins. So the question is, why, if our Torah portion is really about the dreams of Paro, why didn't they choose the dreams of Shlomo and just start when he woke up from the dream? So there's a possibility, this is how I understand it, is just like when Paro has these dreams, and it says that he called all of his advisors and no one could interpret it. So Rashi tells us in the name of the sages, it's not true. They gave interpretations, but Pharaoh knew these were not he could feel they're not the right interpretations. He didn't know exactly what the interpretation was, but he knew what it wasn't. And then the butler speaks up and says, oh, when I was in jail, there was this Hebrew slave who interpreted my dream. Pharaoh calls for Yosef, and everyone knows the story. He interprets the dreams, but then he gives Paro advice. Now, you have to understand, in those days, if you spoke out of turn in front of a king, he could kill you on the spot. The king had absolute power. There wasn't like a court system in those days like we know. The king had full power. So here, he's a Hebrew slave who's been in jail for 12 years. He interprets the dreams, and then without skipping a beat, he starts to tell Pharaoh what he should do about it. And that's what the whole idea of, you'll have 7 years of plenty, and you should appoint someone to gather up all the grains, the whole story. So here, Pharaoh, when he hears this advice, he says, is there anyone as wise as this person? And he appoints Yosef to be second in charge of Egypt. He becomes the viceroy. So that's probably why they chose not necessarily to do the whole dream, but it starts with the same word, Vayikatz Shlomo. He woke up startled from the dream, just like Pharaoh twice woke up startled from the dream. But here, the common theme is not only the dream, it's the wisdom of Yosef, and it's the wisdom of Shlomo. One last thing. In the end of the Haftarah, it says that people recognized that he had what was called the wisdom of God. So in Kabbalah, the letter that's associated with Chokhmah, wisdom, is the Yud. The letter Yud of the four letters of God's name, the Yud is Chokhmah, the first Hey is Bina, the Vav are the six called Zer Anpin, Chesed, Gevurah, Teferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and the final Hey is Malchut. So Yud, the letter Yud, is associated with wisdom. So this is a Torah from Rav Ginsburg that I'm showing you the letter Yud. According to Kabbalah, even the way a Yud is written, there's actually three parts to a Yud. The crown is, or the tip right here is like its own level. The body, and this is called the pathway. The Yud has three levels. This is what the Baal Shem Tov called worlds, souls, and divinity. So there's a type of worldly wisdom, and that's what Shlomo had. So I'm going to read now from the book of Malachim, and it says like this. This is from the 5th chapter, the 9th verse to the 14th verse. It says, and God gave Shlomo vast wisdom and understanding, and also largeness of heart, like the sand that is on the seashore. And Solomon's wisdom excelled the wisdom of all the children of the East country. And then he names a number of names. His fame was in all nations around about. And now it explains what kind of wisdom, how is it manifest? And he spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his poems or songs were 1,005. And he spoke of trees, from the cedar tree that is in Lebanon to the hyssop that comes out of the wall. He spoke also of beasts and of birds, and of creeping things and of fishes. And there came those from all peoples to hear the wisdom of Solomon, from all kings of the earth who had heard of his wisdom. So here it's called the wisdom of Solomon. In the end of the Haftarah, it says the wisdom of God. So Rav Ginsburg explains that wisdom has three levels here. The wisdom of the worlds, this is what's called the wisdom of Shlomo, of Solomon. And here it says he spoke of trees. He from the cedar tree that was in Lebanon to the hyssop that comes out of the wall, he spoke also of beasts and of birds and of creeping things. But some say it's not that he only spoke of, he spoke with. That Shlomo knew the language of the birds, of the animals, of the trees. But this is all called a worldly wisdom. And the two higher levels are called Chokhmat Elokim. And this one is on the level of souls. And that is Shlomo in the Haftarah, his wisdom of judgment. That he could judge souls. He could judge circumstances, human circumstances. And the top level is the pure wisdom of God that was pouring through Shlomo, through prophecy and through divine inspiration. So here we see that Shlomo had a earthly wisdom, a kind of like a soul kind of wisdom, and also a divine wisdom. And this is connected to the Yud, which is Chachma. And as we learned, that this is what Shlomo asked for. He asked for wisdom to judge the people correctly. And so God gave it to him on all three levels. So may we all merit to know what to ask of God when he offers to give us anything that we want. We should know what to ask for. L'chaim, everyone. Chaim.